The massive Valtraxian ship broke through the clouds above Geneva, its dark metal skin reflecting the morning sunlight. People stopped in the streets to stare upward. Some pointed and gasped. Others took videos with their phones. A few ran for shelter, fear written across their faces. Dr. Olivia Martinez watched from the window of her office at the United Nations Space Command. Her heart beat faster as she gripped a tablet computer in her hands. After 20 years of studying languages that no human had ever spoken, she would finally hear words from beyond the stars. "Dr. Martinez, they want you in the main conference room now," said a young aide who appeared at her door, slightly out of breath. Olivia nodded and smoothed her navy blue uniform. She had practiced for this moment countless times, but nothing could truly prepare her for humanity's first contact with an alien civilization. The hallways of the UNSC headquarters buzzed with activity. Military personnel rushed past her. Scientists clutched data pads, talking quickly in excited voices. When Olivia entered the conference room, 30 faces turned to look at her. General Paul Harris nodded at her from the head of the long table. "Dr. Martinez, good. Take a seat. The Valtraxian delegation will arrive in 5 minutes." Olivia sat down next to Navy Lieutenant Jack Russell, whose serious expression couldn't hide the excitement in his eyes. "Ready to make history?" he whispered. Before she could answer, the doors slid open. 4 tall figures entered the room. They walked with perfect grace, their movements smooth and controlled. Their skin was pale blue and they had no hair on their elongated heads. Their eyes were large and completely black, with no visible whites or pupils. They wore silver suits that seemed to flow like water over their thin bodies. The tallest of the 4 stepped forward. "I am High Speaker Zorn of the Valtraxian Collective," he said in perfect English. His voice had a musical quality, rising and falling in strange patterns. "We have observed your world for some time. We come to establish formal relations." General Harris stood and bowed slightly. "Welcome to Earth. We are honored by your presence." The alien's thin lips curved into what might have been a smile. "Yes. We understand your excitement at meeting a more advanced civilization." Olivia noticed Jack's eyebrows rise at the blunt statement. The other humans in the room shifted uncomfortably. The meeting continued for 3 hours. The Valtraxians spoke of trade possibilities, cultural exchange, and technological sharing, though Olivia noted they were vague about what technologies they might actually share. Throughout the discussion, High Speaker Zorn maintained a tone that bordered on condescension. When the aliens spoke among themselves in their own language, their translator devices went quiet. But Olivia's trained ear caught patterns in their speech, rising tones, falling rhythms, sounds that reminded her of something she couldn't quite place. After the meeting, Olivia returned to her office and downloaded the recordings. She played them over and over, focusing on the untranslated Valtraxian speech. A knock at her door interrupted her work. Jack Russell stood there holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said, placing 1 cup on her desk. "Those aliens are something else, aren't they?" Olivia nodded. "Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. Did you see their translator devices? Perfect English with no delay. We've been working on that problem for decades." Jack leaned against her desk. "I'm more concerned about their attitude. Did you catch what Zorn said to the smaller one when they thought we weren't listening? Something about primitive development stage and careful handling required." Olivia looked up in surprise. "You understood that?" "No," Jack smiled. "But I read faces, even alien ones. Plus their body language wasn't hard to interpret. They think we're children." Olivia played a section of the recording. "Listen to this part. When they speak among themselves, there's a musical quality. Almost like singing," Jack finished. "For her." He closed his eyes and listened more carefully. "It reminds me of something." For the next week, Olivia and Jack spent every evening analyzing the Valtraxian language patterns. During the day, more alien ships arrived in Earth orbit. News reports showed Valtraxian delegates meeting with world leaders, always with the same slightly superior attitude that Zorn had displayed. On Friday night, Jack rushed into Olivia's office, his face flushed with excitement. "I've figured out what their speech reminds me of," he said, placing his own tablet on her desk. "Listen to this." He played an audio file. The sound was scratchy and old, a recording of tribal chanting from ancient human history. "This is from an anthropological expedition in 1954. It's a war chant from a remote tribe in the Caucasus Mountains, one of the oldest known human musical patterns." He tapped the screen, bringing up a visual representation of the sound waves. "Now look at this." He placed it side by side with the pattern of Valtraxian speech. The similarities were unmistakable. "That's impossible," Olivia whispered. "They're from another star system." "Maybe," Jack said. "Or maybe there's a connection we don't understand yet." His eyes gleamed with the thrill of discovery. What if they know us better than they're letting on? The next morning, Olivia attended another meeting with the Valtraxians. This time she listened differently, focusing on the musical patterns of their speech rather than the words themselves. When High Speaker Zorn spoke to his companions, she caught a phrase that made her blood run cold. The translator didn't pick it up, but to her trained ear it sounded remarkably like singing apes in a tone of amusement. After the meeting, Zorn approached her directly. "You are the language specialist, yes?" His black eyes studied her face. "You seem particularly attentive to our conversations." "I find your language fascinating," Olivia replied carefully. "As we find yours simple," Zorn said with that same almost smile, though charming in its way, like the first words of a child. Later, when Olivia shared what she had heard with Jack, his face grew serious. "They're hiding something," he said. "I'm going to request access to the historical linguistics database. We need to compare every ancient human chant and song with their speech patterns." Olivia nodded, a feeling of unease growing inside her. They came here acting like they've never met humans before, but what if that's not true? What if they know us very well indeed? In his quarters that night, Jack couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the strange familiarity of the alien speech. He pulled up the oldest human recordings in the database and played them side by side with the Valtraxian language samples. The similarities went beyond coincidence. There was a pattern here, a mystery stretching across the stars, and somehow he knew that solving it would change humanity's understanding of its place in the universe forever. 6 months passed since the Valtraxians first arrived on Earth. Their ships now orbited the planet like new moons. The largest of these vessels was not a warship, but what they called an archive ship, a massive floating library named the Eternal, the Memory. After weeks of careful negotiation, the Valtraxians had agreed to allow a small team of human researchers aboard the archive ship. Professor Alan Winters packed his bags with shaking hands. As a historian who specialized in ancient civilizations, he never imagined he would be chosen for such an important mission. "Professor, your shuttle leaves in 20 minutes, said the young military escort at his door. Alan nodded and closed his suitcase. "Thank you. I'm ready." The trip from Earth to the Valtraxian ship took just under 2 hours. Alan stared out the window as the massive structure grew larger. It looked like a giant silver tree, with a central trunk and branches spreading out in all directions. Lights glowed softly along its surface. When the shuttle docked, Alan followed the other 5 researchers through a long corridor. The walls seemed to shift colors as they walked, responding to their presence. A tall Valtraxian greeted them at the end of the hallway. "I am Kethnar, Chief Archivist," the alien said with a small bow. "Welcome to the Eternal Memory." Kethnar was different from the other Valtraxians Alan had seen in news reports. His manner was less condescending, more genuinely curious. He showed the human team to their quarters, then led them to the main archive chamber. "Our records go back more than 20,000 of your Earth years," Kethnar explained. "You may access the general historical archives. Some sections are restricted for religious reasons." The humans were each assigned a private research station. Alan sat down at his terminal, amazed at how the controls seemed to respond to his thoughts as much as his touch. The first few days were overwhelming. He focused on early Valtraxian history, trying to learn about their home world and how they had developed space travel. But something felt wrong. There were gaps in the records, strange jumps in their historical timeline. When he asked Kethnar about this, the archivist's large black eyes would look away. Some records were lost during the Great Migration, was all he would say. On his 5th day aboard, Alan discovered a reference to something called the origin songs. It appeared in several historical texts but was never explained. When he tried to access files about these songs, the system denied him entry. That night, Alan couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the strange gaps in Valtraxian history and the mysterious origin songs. He got up and went back to his research station, determined to find connections he might have missed. Hours later, as the ship's lighting dimmed to simulate night, Alan found himself deep in the archives, following a trail of references. He had discovered that the oldest Valtraxian texts contained symbols that looked strangely familiar. He pulled up images of ancient human writing, Sumerian cuneiform, early Chinese characters, Proto-Sinaitic script. Then he compared them to the earliest Valtraxian symbols. The similarities were too strong to be coincidence. Alan's heart raced as he sent a secure message to Olivia Martinez back on Earth. Need to talk. Found something important. Can you arrange a video call? The next day, Kethnar allowed him to use a private communication booth. When Olivia's face appeared on the screen, Alan could see Lieutenant Russell sitting beside her. I don't have much time, Alan said quickly. Have you made any progress with those language patterns? Olivia nodded. Jack and I have identified 47 distinct patterns in Valtraxian speech that match ancient human chants. It's beyond coincidence, Alan. What have you found? Alan held up a tablet showing side-by-side comparisons of ancient writing systems. Their earliest writing shares root symbols with human scripts. And there's something else. They have these restricted files about something called origin songs, I think. He stopped as a warning light flashed on his console. Someone's monitoring this call. I need to show you something before they cut us off. He tapped at his controls. I found this audio file in a section about their oldest religious ceremonies. Listen. Alan played a recording of what sounded like Valtraxian voices singing in a haunting, rhythmic pattern. Jack leaned forward, his eyes wide. The melody was almost identical to one of the ancient human chants they had been studying. Suddenly, the door to the communication booth slid open. Kethnar stood there, his blue face darker than usual. This session is terminated, he said coldly. He reached over and cut the transmission before Alan could say anything more. You have accessed restricted archives, Kethnar said, his musical voice now flat and hard. This is a serious violation of our agreement. I'm sorry, Alan said. I was following a research path and didn't realize. You will return to your quarters until further notice, Kethnar interrupted. Your access privileges are suspended. Back in his small room, Alan paced nervously. He had seen Kethnar's reaction when the origin song played. It wasn't just anger. It was fear. Meanwhile, on Earth, Olivia and Jack replayed the brief recording Alan had sent. This confirms everything, Jack said quietly. The pattern is identical to the Proto-Indo-European war chant we found last week. It's the same song, Olivia. How is that possible unless the Valtraxians and humans share a history? Olivia finished. But they claim to be from a star system 60 light-years away. Jack shook his head. Someone isn't telling the truth, and I think they're worried we're figuring it out. That evening, as Alan sat in his quarters under what amounted to house arrest, he heard a soft knock at his door. When it slid open, Kethnar stood there alone. We must speak privately, the Valtraxian said in a low voice. What you have discovered, it is dangerous knowledge. Dangerous to whom? Alan asked. Kethnar's large eyes seemed to look through Alan rather than at him. To both our peoples, perhaps. You must understand, Professor Winters. There are those among my kind who would never accept the truth about our origins. And what is that truth? Alan asked, his mouth suddenly dry. Before Kethnar could answer, an alarm began to sound throughout the ship. The Valtraxian's head jerked up, his expression changing to one of alarm. It has begun, he whispered. They have moved the timeline forward. You must get a message to your people. He pressed a small device into Alan's hand. This contains files from our oldest archives. The truth is there, but you must... The door slid open again. 2 Valtraxian guards stood in the corridor, their faces stern. Archivist Kethnar, your presence is required in the command center, one said. All humans are to be secured in their quarters immediately. As Kethnar was led away, he gave Alan one last meaningful look. Whatever was happening, it was bad. And somehow Alan's discoveries were connected to it. Through his small window, Alan could see Valtraxian ships moving into new positions around Earth. This was no longer a scientific or cultural exchange. It looked like the beginning of a military operation. Admiral Susan Carter stood in the UNSC command center, her face grim as she looked at the large screen showing Earth and the positions of Valtraxian ships. In the last 12 hours, every alien vessel had moved into attack formation. They now formed a ring around the planet. All attempts at communication have been ignored, reported her communications officer. They're blocking our signals to our teams on their archive ship as well. Susan nodded. She had expected this. Something had changed in the Valtraxians' behavior over the past week. Their diplomats had suddenly cut off all talks and returned to their ships. Their official message claimed they had detected cultural contamination that required them to limit contact. What's the status of Operation Echo? She asked, turning to a scientist in a white lab coat. Ready for deployment, Admiral, he replied. Dr. Martinez has completed the audio patterns. But without testing, we can't be sure how effective they'll be. Susan looked at Olivia, who stood nearby with Jack Russell. Both had dark circles under their eyes from days without proper sleep. It's our best chance, Olivia said. Based on what Alan sent us in our own research, these sound patterns trigger something deep in Valtraxian psychology. We think it's tied to their earliest memories as a species, which they've been hiding from us, Jack added, and probably from most of their own people too. Susan turned back to the main screen. We'll deploy Echo only if they attack first. Until then, maintain defensive positions. Meanwhile, on the Valtraxian archive ship, Alan sat on the floor of his quarters. The small device Kethnar had given him projected images onto the wall. He had spent hours going through the files, each more shocking than the last. The oldest Valtraxian records showed their ancestors living not on a distant planet, but on Earth. The images were unmistakable, primitive, humans wearing animal skins using stone tools. But then came images of another alien species, tall beings with glowing eyes who were neither human nor Valtraxian. These beings, called the predecessors in the text, had taken a small group of primitive humans from Earth approximately 20,000 years ago. They had transported them across the stars to serve as workers. The texts described genetic modifications, gradual changes to help the humans survive on different worlds. When Alan found records of a predecessor ship returning to Earth throughout ancient history, his hands began to shake. This explained why so many ancient human cultures had similar myths about sky gods who brought knowledge. Then came the most shocking revelation. Roughly 5,000 years ago, the predecessors had suddenly disappeared, abandoning their modified humans across numerous worlds. Those stranded groups had to survive on their own. Some died out. Others, like the group that became the Valtraxians, managed to rebuild their civilization from scratch. Over thousands of years, they had forgotten their origins. Their leaders rewrote their history, claiming they had always been superior beings from another world. The truth was hidden, accessible only to the highest ranks of their society. A loud bang on his door made Alan jump. He quickly shut off the projector and hid the device. The door slid open. 2 guards entered, followed by High Speaker Zorn himself. Professor Winters, Zorn said coldly, you have accessed forbidden knowledge. You're hiding the truth from your own people, Alan replied, surprised by his own courage. You're not a different species, you're human, modified by the predecessors, but still human. Your ancestors came from Earth. Zorn's face darkened. Primitive lies. We are Valtraxian. We have always been Valtraxian. Then why do your oldest songs match our ancient chants? Why do your earliest writing symbols match ours? Why? Enough, Zorn hissed. You will be contained until the cleansing is complete. Cleansing? Alan felt cold fear spread through his body. What are you planning? Zorn smiled that strange, cold smile. Your species is a reminder of what we once were. Primitive, weak, emotional. Your existence creates questions among our young. After today, those questions will end. As the guards took Alan away to a holding cell, alarms began to sound throughout the ship. Back on Earth, Susan Carter received the message she had been dreading. Valtraxian ships are powering weapons. Energy readings indicate they're preparing to fire on major cities. Deploy Operation Echo, she ordered. All stations, all frequencies. Around the world, massive speaker arrays activated. These had been built secretly over the past month, disguised as new communication towers. Now they broadcast a specific pattern of sounds into the sky. Ancient human war chants that Olivia and Jack had reconstructed from the oldest human records. The sounds were not just sent through air, but converted to radio waves that would reach the Valtraxian ships. The pattern was repeated over and over, growing stronger. On board the Valtraxian command ship, High Speaker Zorn was giving the final order to begin the attack when the first notes of echo reached them. He paused, a strange expression crossing his face. What is that sound? Asked his second-in-command. Block it, Zorn ordered, suddenly looking uncomfortable. It's a human attempt to distract us. But the sound continued, reaching every Valtraxian ship. Crew members paused in their duties, heads tilting as if listening to a distant memory. Some began to hum along with the pattern without realizing what they were doing. On the archive ship, Alan felt the floor vibrate with the sound. In his cell, he pressed his ear against the wall, recognizing the chants that he, Olivia, and Jack had discovered. The guards outside his door were standing very still, their eyes unfocused. One guard slowly sank to his knees, beginning to rock, back and forth with the rhythm. The other put his hands over his ears as if trying to block out the sound, but his lips were moving, forming words to a song he had never consciously learned. In the command center of the lead Valtraxian vessel, chaos was spreading. Junior officers were abandoning their posts, some falling to the floor, others singing in voices filled with emotion they had been taught to suppress. Silence that noise, Zorn screamed. But his own voice betrayed him, cracking with emotion he couldn't control. Fire the weapons, begin the attack, but no one was listening anymore. The carefully constructed lies of generations were crumbling under the weight of genetic memory, triggered by songs their ancestors had sung on Earth 20,000 years ago. Songs their leaders had corrupted and hidden, knowing the power they held. As Operation Echo continued to broadcast, the Valtraxian attack faltered before it began. Lieutenant Jack Russell checked his weapon one last time, as the small rescue ship approached the massive Valtraxian archive vessel. 5 other soldiers sat with him in the cramped space, their faces tense but determined. The USS Defiance, their home ship, had broken through the Valtraxian blockade during the confusion caused by Operation Echo. 2 minutes to docking, the pilot announced. Scans show minimal resistance. Most of the crew appears to be incapacitated. Jack nodded. The war chants were working better than anyone had expected. Reports from around Earth showed Valtraxian ships drifting out of formation, their weapons powered down. Some vessels were broadcasting confused messages, others complete silence. Remember, our only mission is to extract Professor Winters, Jack told his team. We get in, find him, and get out. No unnecessary engagement. The ship shuddered as it attached to the Valtraxian vessel. Jack led his team through the docking tube and into the alien corridor. The scene inside was strange and unsettling. Valtraxian crew members sat or lay on the floor, some rocking back and forth, others quietly singing to themselves. None seemed to notice the human soldiers. The echo effect is stronger here, whispered one of Jack's team. They're hearing it, directly through their ship's systems. Jack consulted a small device showing a map of the ship based on Alan's previous transmissions. Detention cells should be 3 levels down. This way. They moved quickly through the ship, weapons ready, but rarely needed. The few Valtraxians who noticed them didn't try to stop them. Some simply stared with wide, confused eyes. Others made strange gestures with their hands as if trying to remember something important. On the detention level, they found 2 guards outside a cell door. Unlike the others, these Valtraxians seemed to be fighting against the effect of the chance. They raised their weapons as the humans approached. "Stand down," Jack called out, his own weapon aimed. "We don't want to hurt you." One guard fired, the energy blast hitting the wall near Jack's head. The human team took cover and returned fire. The brief firefight ended quickly, both guards stunned but alive. Jack used the guard's access card to open the cell door. Inside, Alan Winters looked up in surprise. "Lieutenant Russell, how did you get here?" "We can talk later, Professor. Right now, we need to move." As they hurried back through the corridors, Alan explained what he had learned from the secret files. "They're us, Jack. The Valtraxians are humans who were taken from Earth thousands of years ago and modified by another alien species called the predecessors. That explains why the war chants affect them so strongly," Jack said. "They're hearing the original versions of songs their ancestors sang on Earth. Yes, their leaders kept the truth hidden, creating a false history claiming they were always superior beings. But the genetic memory remained, buried deep in their minds. They turned a corner and found themselves face to face with Kethnar, the archivist. The Valtraxian was alone and unarmed. "Professor Winters," Kethnar said, his voice strained, "you must come with me. There is something you need to see." Jack raised his weapon, but Alan put a hand on his arm. "We can trust him. He gave me the files that expose the truth." "Your team can come too," Kethnar said to Jack. "What I have to show you is important for both our peoples." Jack hesitated, then nodded. "Lead the way, but we're watching you." Kethnar took them to a large, circular room deep within the ship. Unlike the rest of the vessel, this space was warm and filled with soft light. In the center stood a group of Valtraxians, mostly older ones with ornate clothing that marked them as scholars. "This is the Hall of Origins," Kethnar explained. "Few are permitted to enter. It houses our oldest and most sacred records." One elderly Valtraxian stepped forward. "I am Elder Vox. For generations, we keepers of knowledge have preserved the truth even as our leaders hid it from our people." His voice shook with emotion. "The songs you broadcast have awakened memories that cannot be denied. Our people are remembering." "Remembering what?" Jack asked. "Earth," Elder Vox replied simply. "Our first home. The world of our ancestors." Alan looked around the room in wonder. The walls were covered with images that chronicled the Valtraxian journey, from primitive humans on Earth to their abduction by the predecessors, their transformation and abandonment, and their struggle to rebuild their civilization. "We believed the lie for so long," Kethnar said sadly, "that we were superior beings who evolved separately from humans. Our leaders taught us to look down on Earth humans as primitive versions of life. But we are the same species, just shaped by different environments and the predecessors' modifications." "High Speaker Zorn knows this truth?" Jack asked. "Yes," Elder Vox nodded. "All our highest leaders know. They feared that if our people learned we were once like you, it would destroy the foundation of our society. Our sense of superiority would collapse." A loud alarm suddenly blared through the room. One of the scholars rushed to a communication panel on the wall, listening intently. "High Speaker Zorn has managed to isolate himself and loyal commanders from the music," the scholar reported. "They have regained control of the command ship and are preparing to attack Earth, despite the confusion among the rest of the fleet." "How many ships can they still control?" Jack asked urgently. "3, perhaps 4, but that is enough to cause terrible destruction." Jack activated his communication device. "Defiance, this is Russell. We have a situation. Zorn has regained control of some ships and is planning to continue the attack." The reply came through with static. "Understood, Lieutenant. Admiral Carter is redirecting defenses, but our weapons may not be effective against their technology. Alan stepped forward, a determined look on his face. We need to broadcast the truth to all Valtraxians, not just the songs, but the history Zorn has been hiding. Kethnar's eyes widened. The Hall of Origins has a direct link to all our ships. We can transmit images and records to every vessel in the fleet. Do it, Jack said. Show them who they really are. The scholars moved quickly, accessing the ancient archives. Soon, images began to flow from the Hall of Origins to every Valtraxian ship. Pictures of Earth, of primitive humans who were their ancestors, of the predecessors who had taken them from their home. On the command ship, High Speaker Zorn was giving the order to fire when his crew gasped in shock. The main screens filled with images from the secret archives, scenes of Earth from 20,000 years ago, proof of their human origins. Ignore those lies, Zorn shouted. They are human tricks. But his voice lost its power as the evidence mounted. His crew stared at the screens, recognition dawning in their eyes. They were seeing the truth about themselves for the first time, and they were hearing the original versions of songs that had been sacred to them for millennia. One by one, Zorn's loyal officers stepped away from their posts. The attack faltered once more, this time for good. 2 years passed since the day the Valtraxians nearly attacked Earth. Dr. Olivia Martinez stood at the large window of Harmony Station, watching shuttles arrive from both Earth and Valtraxia. The space station hung in orbit between Earth and the Moon, built as a neutral meeting place for the two peoples who were learning to see each other as family rather than strangers. Hard to believe how much has changed, said a familiar voice behind her. Olivia turned to see Jack Russell, now wearing the uniform of a diplomatic officer rather than a military one. His new role suited him well. Yes, she agreed. 2 years ago they were ready to destroy us. Now we're exchanging students and researchers. Jack stood beside her at the window. Not all of them have accepted the truth. High Speaker Zorn and his loyalists still refuse to acknowledge their human origins. They've established a separate colony on one of Valtraxia's moons. But they're a small minority now, Olivia said. Most Valtraxians wanted to know the truth once they heard the songs and saw the evidence. The crisis had ended peacefully after the broadcasts from the Hall of Origins. Valtraxian society had experienced a profound shock as the truth spread, but instead of leading to collapse, it had sparked a renaissance of sorts. Their people had begun to rediscover their humanity, embracing emotions and customs they had been taught to reject. A group approaching the window caught Olivia's attention. Professor Alan Winters was leading a tour of young Valtraxians through the station. These blue-skinned visitors looked like teenagers, their large eyes wide with excitement as they took in the views of Earth. The first official student exchange group, Jack explained. 20 Valtraxian youth who will spend 6 months studying Earth history firsthand. Olivia smiled. Who better than Alan to guide them? He's spent more time in their archives than any other human. He's bringing them to the new museum today, Jack said. Want to join them? I need to go there anyway to meet the Valtraxian ambassador. Together they walked through the bright corridors of Harmony Station. People from both worlds moved about their business, some still watching each other with caution, others talking, animatedly together. The museum occupied a large section of the station. Its entrance featured 2 statues side by side, one of a primitive human from ancient Earth, another of a modern Valtraxian. Between them stood a mysterious third figure, representing the predecessors who had connected their histories. Inside, Alan was speaking to his group near a central display. This exhibit shows what we've been able to piece together about your journey, he explained. Your ancestors were taken from Earth approximately 20,000 years ago during the last Ice Age. The young Valtraxians listened intently. Unlike the adults of their world who had grown up believing in their inherent superiority, these youth seemed genuinely curious about their origins. The predecessors took small groups from different parts of Earth, Alan continued. They established colonies on 17 different worlds that we know of so far. Valtraxia was the most successful of these colonies. One young Valtraxian raised a hand. Why did the predecessors take humans from Earth? What did they want? We still don't know for certain, Alan admitted. From both our records, it seems. They were conducting some kind of long-term experiment with human development. When they suddenly disappeared about 5,000 years ago, they abandoned all their human colonies. And our ancestors forgot they were human, another student said. Not exactly forgot, Alan corrected gently. Your leaders deliberately changed your history over generations. They created myths about being a separate, superior species, but certain things couldn't be erased completely. He led them to a special room at the heart of the museum. Inside was a simple display, 2 audio recordings playing side by side, one from ancient Earth, another from Valtraxian religious ceremonies. The melodies were nearly identical. These songs survived across 20,000 years and 60 light years, Alan explained. The patterns were so deeply embedded in your minds that even with altered genes and thousands of years of separation, you still remembered them. The young Valtraxians stood silently, listening to the intertwined melodies. Olivia noticed several of them swaying slightly, their bodies naturally responding to rhythms their ancestors had created on Earth millennia ago. Across the room, Olivia saw Kethnar speaking with Admiral Carter. The Valtraxian archivist had become an important voice for peace between the two peoples. After helping expose the truth, he had been named ambassador to Earth. Our greatest challenge now, Kethnar was saying to the Admiral, is understanding who the predecessors were and why they abandoned their experiments. The records suggest they visited Earth many times throughout history. We've established joint research teams to look for evidence of their return. Admiral Carter nodded. If they came back once, they might come again. Jack excused himself to join their conversation, leaving Olivia watching the young students. One Valtraxian girl had stepped closer to the audio display, her eyes closed as she listened to the ancient songs. A human museum guide approached and smiled at her. Would you like to learn the words to the Earth version? We've reconstructed them from archaeological findings. The girl nodded eagerly. The guide began to sing softly, and after a moment the Valtraxian girl joined in. Soon several others from both species were singing together, their voices blending in harmony. Olivia felt a lump in her throat as she watched. 2 years ago, these people had been on the brink of war. Now they were singing the same songs, recognizing the shared heritage that stretched across the stars. Later that evening, Olivia joined Jack, Alan, and Kethnar for dinner in the station's observation lounge. Earth hung like a blue jewel in the window beside them. The genetic testing results came back today, Alan told them. Despite 20,000 years of separation and the modifications made by the predecessors, humans and Valtraxians are still 98.7% genetically identical. We're the same species, just adapted to different worlds. And what happens now? Jack asked. Where do we go from here? Kethnar looked out at the stars beyond Earth. Together, I hope. There are 15 other human colony worlds out there, abandoned by the predecessors like we were. Some may have forgotten their origins as we did. Others may remember. And the predecessors themselves might still exist somewhere, Olivia added. We should be ready if they return. As they spoke, more ships arrived from Earth and Valtraxia, bringing people who had once been strangers but now recognized each other as kin. 2 branches of humanity, separated for 20,000 years, were learning to sing in harmony once more.